Good morning, and welcome to the in-person and live stream service of the First Unitarian Church of Hobart, Indiana. My first day back in a year and a half. I'm emotional. You guys know I'm a crier. My name is Joe Heaston. My pronouns are he, him, or anything but late for dinner. And I participate in the life of the church by just looking for opportunities to be of service within my skill set and disability range. So, that was what you wrote about what you do, okay. We are a religious community of people with diverse beliefs and shared values. Our diverse beliefs are expressed in our 6 sources, and our shared values are expressed in our 7 principles, both of which can be found online. Together we strive to grow spiritually, build community, and live our values in the world. We are currently in search for a full-time minister. When we do not have a minister in the pulpit, we invite members or guests to share a special message with us. Today our worship service will be led by guest speaker and fellow Unitarian, Paul Kendrick of Chicago. Welcome him, everybody. Thank you. We are currently live streaming on Zoom and YouTube. Our sermons are recorded and will be made available for future viewing on Facebook, YouTube, and the church website. Let your Facebook and Twitter friends know that you are attending worship with hashtag First Unitarian Hobart. Announcements. If there's any other besides this, please let me know. The worship team needs you! Exclamation point. We have openings for this critical ministry of the church. Contact Maggie Reister or come to the worship meeting today at 12:30.
Not today.
Oh, it said today.
I know, that's an old.
Oh. Come to the next worship meeting, which you should get an email telling you when it is, probably. And it'll maybe at 12:30 after church and in Zoom. So any other announcements that weren't brought to the church's attention before service? Okay, then we start off with let's all take a deep breath, which I need. And another. Now let's join together in a spirit of reverence while we listen to the prelude played by Jeremy Jacobson.
Please join us in the lighting of the chalice. The words are on the screen, and if you're on Zoom, they're on your screen also. And they're right here. Okay.
I can't read it.
You can't read it? Here.
We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs.
We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning in celebration of the life we share together. Opening words.
Told me to do them.
Oh, no, closing words. The opening words are a place. Oh, and welcome. Dad is back in town. My 94-year-old father, a long-time member of the Unitarian Church. Thanks, Dad. The opening words today are A Place of Belonging and Caring by Kimberly Ann Tomchak Carlson. It is not by chance that you arrived here today. You have been looking for something larger than yourself. Inside of you, there is a yearning, a calling, a hope for more, a desire for a place of belonging and caring. Through your struggles, someone nurtured you into being, instilling a belief in a shared purpose, a common yet precious resource. That belonging to all of us that belongs to all of us when we share. And so you begin seeking a beloved community, a people that does not put fences around love, a community that holds its arms open to possibilities of love, a heart home to nourish your soul and share your gifts. Welcome home. Welcome to worship. Please join me in singing the opening hymn, number 1018. That would be in the teal hymnal. All the hymnals are behind you, Dad. Teal, here you go. Number 1018. I know we're not used to having no paper in church, so thank you for bearing with us. Come and go with me. Stand up, yes. With me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me.
There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound.
There'll be justice.
There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound.
There'll be singing.
There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm bound.
Proclamation of Faith. The words are indeed on the screen. Thank you, James Johnson. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. Service is its prayer. And this is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. You may be seated. Is that right? No. No, it's not right. Yeah, oh, greet, yeah, that's right. Yes, don't sit down. Hello.
Don't tell me I'm wrong. Okay, everybody gets the idea. We're going to greet our neighbors, say hello to one another.
Hello, everyone.
Howdy, everybody. It's good to see you, Pete. I've just been yelling into this one. Oh, for joys and sorrows, I'm going to grab this one. Okay, folks, you may be seated. sorrows and hold them in our hearts, including those too tender to mention. Next up, we will have a story for all ages, Something on My Face by Karen G. Johnston, and I'm not sure who's reading the story. Maggie will be reading the story. Kids of all ages, come on down and sit here and enjoy it with Maggie.
I do actually need volunteers, so that's a good thing.
I'm here.
No, it's okay. Like, no, just to say something, not to, Where do the kids sit? Anywhere. Okay. Well, thank you for coming down, because I do kind of need a little bit of help with this. I need you to be a human mirror, and one at a time, I'd like, anybody else can do this too. I'd like you to tell me that I have something on my face. After you do that, I'm going to respond, and then it'll be somebody else's turn. It's really simple. Go ahead, Joe.
Maggie, dear, I don't want to embarrass you, but you have what looks like some chocolate on your face.
Oh, nope. I don't have anything on my face.
Hi, Maggie. It's so nice to see you, but you have some, I think it looks like chocolate.
What are you talking about? You're wrong. I'm not going to listen to you.
Maggie, have you been eating blueberries again?
Funny you should say that, because you're the one who has something on your face. Tell me I have something on my face.
You have something on your face, Maggie.
You must be joking. I am an expert face washer. I have studied face washing for years.
I'm pretty sure you have something on your face.
How dare you tell me I have something on my face? You don't get to play with me anymore.
It's so wonderful to be with you, and I just want to let you know, my friend, yeah, I think there's a little smudge on your face.
I have something wrong on my, I have something on my face? What's wrong with me? I'm going back to bed.
What do you have on your face there?
Everybody has something on their face. So why mention it? There's nothing we can do about it. It's always going to be this way. I have something on my face? Thank you for telling me. I've been washing it away bit by bit, but I guess some of it's stickier than I thought. I really appreciate you letting me know. Would you be willing to help me wash my face? It's okay. It's okay. Yeah, actually.
Yelled at your father.
That's chocolate frosting. I would recommend licking.
It was chocolate. Oh, licking. I'm silly me. Silly me. Oh. When you think about being in community together and what it means to be a Unitarian Universalist, which response did you think was the best one? Maybe the last one? I think so too. I thank you for telling me. That was okay, right? That was probably a little better. Sometimes when we're building community together, it's important to listen to what other people have to say, even if we might not want to hear it at first, but we do that because it's part of our covenant, our promise to each other. There are times when we need to hear news or feedback that causes us discomfort, But in hearing it and responding to it constructively with curiosity and humility, we can more easily go about building beloved community. This is especially true when it comes to feedback about how cultural privilege along race, gender, gender identity, ability, disability, sexual orientation, class, impacts others. This interactive story demonstrates the many ways that we respond, some unskilled, ending with one that affirms our covenant with each other. Thanks for playing along. Where are we? Oh, I have a reading. I do, I have a reading. The reading is John Lewis, by John Lewis, Walking with the Wind. Although 15 of us children were outside my Aunt Seneva's house playing in her dirt yard. About 15. We're playing in the yard. The sky began clouding over, the wind started picking up, lightning flashed far off in the distance, and suddenly I wasn't thinking about playing anymore. I was terrified. Aunt Seneva was the only adult around, and as the sky blackened and the wind grew stronger, she herded us all inside. Her house was not the biggest place around, and it seemed even smaller with so many children squeezed inside, small and surprisingly quiet. All of the shouting and laughter that had been going on earlier outside had stopped. The wind was howling now, and the house was starting to shake. We were scared. Even Aunt Seneva was scared. And then it got worse. Now the house was beginning to sway. The wood plank flooring beneath us began to bend, and then a corner of the room started lifting up. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing. None of us could. This storm was actually pulling the house toward the sky, with us inside it. That was when Aunt Seneva told us to clasp hands. Line up and hold hands, she said, and we did as we were told. Then she had us walk as a group toward the corner of the room that was rising. From the kitchen to the front of the house we walked, the wind screaming outside, sheets of rain beating on the tin roof. Then we walked back the other direction as another end of the house began to lift. And so it went, back and forth, 15 children walking with the wind, holding that trembling house down with the weight of our small bodies. More than half a century has passed since that day, and it has struck me more than once over those many years that our society is not unlike the children in that house, rocked again and again by the winds of one storm or another, the walls around us seeming at times as if they might fly apart. It seemed that way in the 1960s, at the height of the civil rights movement, when America itself felt as if it might burst at the seams. So much tension, so many storms. But the people of conscience never left the house. They never ran away. They stayed. They came together and they did the best they could, clasping hands and moving towards the corner of the house that was the weakest. And then another corner would lift, and we would go there. And eventually, inevitably, the storm would settle, and the house would still stand. But we knew another storm would come, and we would have to do it all over again. And we did. And we still do. All of us, you and I, children holding hands, walking with the wind. It is my honor to introduce our speaker today. Some of us had an opportunity to chat with you, Paul, during our first hour and learn a little bit more about your background. Paul is a leader, speaker, and writer. He and his father, a Unitarian minister, just retired, recently published their third book, 9 Days, The Race to Save Martin Luther King's Life and Win the 1960s Election. Paul is the executive director of Rust Belt Rising, an organization training Midwest leaders on connecting with working families, winning elections, and delivering change to create thriving communities. Previously, Paul served in President Obama's White House Personnel Office, recruiting and developing talented, diverse teams of appointees for the administration. I am especially happy to have Paul here. He is an about-to-be dad at any moment, and luckily, the planets lined up, and that mama's not in labor yet. So please help me welcome Paul Kendrick.
Can you hear me all right? Sound good? Yes, we're 10 days from the due date, so let's have my phone out in case I have to take off back to Chicago, and then we'll get my dad in on Zoom to finish the service, but I think we'll be okay. But thank you so much. What a wonderful community this church is. I mean, the hour I spent with you, the service thus far, just really, really special. To just feel the love you all have for each other and the fun you have together. And so this is a really, I'm really grateful that you'd welcome me, and Maggie, to invite me. So my father and I have written 3 books together. The first was about a civil rights case that happened in Boston before the Civil War, and this free black community's kind of civil rights fight. Called Sarah's Long Walk, and the second one's about Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln. And so most people wouldn't understand, for most people having like a parent correct their paper in high school might have been unbearable, much less embarking on 3 books together. So it's a little different, but when you are the child of a UU minister and a social worker, I didn't grow up understanding the stock market or business or real estate or things that might have been maybe perhaps more marketable, but I was very interested in social justice. And so, and I'm glad for that, and I wouldn't change anything. So our books together have had this theme of trying to find hopeful moments in our history that we might learn from, not sentimental, but in clear-eyed ways, things that we can draw on, that help us in our time go forward. And because people that know me know my interest in civil rights, a neighbor of ours in Boston, where my father lives, I live in Chicago, said, "You should meet my mentor. He's a man named Harris Wofford. You should sit down with him. I think you'd really like talking to Harris." And meeting Harris changed my life. Harris was in his upper 80s. He passed away 2 years ago in his 90s. And we took a walk in Washington, D.C., around like the Tidal Basin near the monuments. And when we walked by the Martin Luther King monument, that was Harris's friend, who he misses. When he looks out at the Kennedy Center, John Kennedy was his friend, and Bobby Kennedy was his friend, who he missed. And so these were his friends. These were people he knew. And so through Harris, history kind of really came alive in amazing ways. And Harris had a fascinating life. His grandmother had taken him to India when he was a teenager, and he got obsessed with Gandhiism and wondered, could we bring that to America to change our caste system? And he had decided to go to Howard Law School, a historically black law school, first white person anyone could remember going to Howard Law School, because he felt, well, I can't just be about these things theoretically. I have to actually get out of my comfort zone and be in a community different than one I grew up in to learn. And his grandmother actually passed out when he said he was going to a black law school in the late 1940s. And she was so worried he had thrown away his professional future. And Harris, he would go on to help found the Peace Corps, to run the AmeriCorps program. He'd be a U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania, and he would marry the man he fell in love with in his 90s, a year before he passed away. So he just had, and he was so courtly when you went to meet with him. He would just welcome you in. He wanted to learn about you. He wanted to talk about the future. He was just very attuned to how we continue making changes. But I got really interested in that he, like I said, he was very passionate about nonviolence and civil disobedience. And then he heard there was this 26-year-old minister in Montgomery, Alabama, named Martin Luther King, who was actually putting it into action with the bus boycott. And so Harris, who was, he'd become a law professor, he starts writing this Dr. King letters. He wants to help Dr. King. And they began a correspondence, and they began a friendship. Harris found ways to be useful. He raised money so Dr. King could visit India with Coretta. He helped King in his writing for his first book on doing research. And he was an advisor because they shared this love of nonviolence and belief it might change America. Dr. King was really doing it. Harris wanted to support that. And so, but Harris worked on the 1960 Kennedy campaign and was a part of how the Kennedy campaign would speak up for and imperiled Dr. King at a very tenuous moment in his life, the moment his family was most scared for his life. And Harris and his team would help shift black voters to elect Kennedy. And so my father and I felt, wow, this is a story we need to record and really capture this while we have this amazing opportunity of spending time with Harris. And we got really interested in Harris's teammate on the Kennedy campaign, who was a man named Louis Martin. And Louis Martin was the editor of the Chicago black paper, the Chicago Defender. And Harris and his boss, a man named Sergeant Shriver, who was an in-law to the Kennedys, they were two white liberals trying to do black outreach for the Kennedy campaign, trying to convince black voters that this patrician Massachusetts politician who had been very accommodating to segregationist senators was actually better for black voters, and they were failing at it. So they recruited, yeah, big surprise. So they recruited this man named Louis Martin, who was an incredible strategist, who was known and respected in every black community around the country, and was just masterful at orchestrating things. He was about 20 years older than Harris, actually close to 10 years older than Harris, but they formed this really duo that had a lot of fun together because Harris was, he had the briefcase in his hand. He knew all the civil rights laws, and then Louis knew how the world worked and was really helping him actually organize. And Harris shared my sense, and then in getting to know Louis Martin's daughters. Louis Martin died about 20 years ago. We all felt Louis Martin was an American hero that people ought to know about because he would go on in the 60s to orchestrate really pushing the Kennedys on civil rights legislation. He would get Thurgood Marshall onto the Supreme Court. He did a lot that was not widely known. And so wanted to tell the story of this team, how well they worked together, what we could learn from this interracial team, but then got very fascinated and really fell in love with the Atlanta student movement that forced the events of this book. So in 1960, there was a sit-in in North Carolina for black college students sit down at a lunch counter to protest segregation. And in Atlanta at the time, a few days later, a student named Lonnie King was reading the newspaper. And Lonnie King was a football player at Morehouse. He grew up as poor as could be. He was he grew up with Martin Luther King in the church that King's father was the minister of, Ebenezer. And Lonnie just had a magnetism that drew you in, that made you want to be part of something. And he said to a fellow student named Julian Bond, who would go on to be a famous civil rights leader, he said, "Do you think someone's going to do this in Atlanta? These young people just sitting down at a lunch counter?" And Julian Bond said, "I'm sure someone's going to do that. Yeah, someone will definitely do that." And Lonnie said, "Okay, we'll call our meeting for tonight. You canvass that side of the cafe, I'll canvass this side of the cafe, let's get people signed up." And I love that story because one, that was Lonnie King, but it's a real lesson for all of us. We could just get started. We could just get going on organizing something. We don't have to assume it'll be done. We don't have to wait for someone. Lonnie just took action, and he started building a movement in Atlanta of the women of Spelman, the men of Morehouse, doing these sit-ins, which were, and we talked about this in the previous hour, the sit-ins were really masterful because they were making Americans have to focus in on an issue that they would just as well have ignored and kept the status quo, but really to grapple with, is that right that these college students would not be served and they would be taken off to jail? And so they wanted to force that issue. And at this exact moment, Martin Luther King is moving home to Atlanta. He was 31 years old now. And in getting to know some of Dr. King's friends, it helped us understand that this is a different King than we're used to. We think of the March on Washington. We think of the leader in the 1960s, that towering figure. He was worried about becoming a one-hit wonder at this point. And he was struggling and searching for how the heck he was going to make national change because people were looking to him to do it. He had this bus boycott that desegregated a small southern city of Montgomery. But he was like, where is this movement going? People are looking at me to change America, and I don't know how to do it. So he decided to move home, be the co-pastor with his father of Ebenezer. And he gets home, and then these college students are saying, you inspired us with this bus boycott. We got a new spin on things. We're doing this a new way. We're going to go to these lunch counters. It's time for you to put your body on the line. Because Dr. King, at 31, had never spent a night in jail. These college students were risking their life. I mean, I was so blown away and just always continually inspired by their courage because these were young people who had just gotten to college. They were 18, just showed up. Parents, saved up and dreamed of them going to college, and they get there, get drawn into a movement, and decide they're going to risk their lives. Because some people didn't know if Gandhi's nonviolence could work in America because they thought it was too suicidal to go into a Jim Crow jail willingly. We're so used to the black and white photographs of civil rights leaders in jail, we may take for granted just how radical what they were doing was. So they pressure King because this man I got to know in Atlanta, Lonnie King, who unfortunately also passed away 2 years ago, Lonnie, the Atlanta civil rights, the student leader, he was so tired of these two presidential candidates. They're not talking about our issue. And how often do we feel like that as activists? The politicians, they're being too cautious. They don't want to deal with the controversial issue. So Kennedy and Nixon, they're talking about things halfway around the world. They're not talking about the injustices here at home. And us, for him, my friends, our college students doing these sit-ins. So we're going to do a sit-in 3 weeks before the election to make them have to talk about it. And we're going to get our emergingly famous friend Martin Luther King to do it with us. And so they pressure King into doing the sit-in. King's father doesn't want him to do it. King's father was too scared for his life, understandably. He loved his son. His son had a wife, 2 children, and his wife was pregnant with their third, Coretta. And Daddy King had kind of promised the other older black leaders of Atlanta that when his son moved home, he wasn't going to cause any civil strife. He's going to focus on those backwoods towns in Georgia. We have some nice accommodations here in Atlanta. Don't worry, he's not going to cause any trouble. But young people have a great impatience to say, oh, but it's not equality. We may have some arrangements right now, it's not equality. And so the young people are pressuring 31-year-old Dr. King, his dad saying, don't do this. And Lonnie, my friend, said to Dr. King, and he said to his father, I was a part of your church. I came, and every year, Daddy King, you preached a sermon that said you can't lead from the back, you got to lead from the front. So it's time for your son to do that. And Dr. King was like, all right, I'll see you in the morning at the sit-in. Not in exactly those words. He said, okay, so where, I'll meet you at the bridge. And so this was going to change Dr. King's life. So the students planned to sit in a place called Rich's Department Store. that was the crown jewel department store of the South. Anyone who, any roots in Atlanta knows Rich's because it was, families loved to go shop for the holidays. It was the department store. And so more than 50 students and King are arrested that morning for asking to be served at the Magnolia Tea Room. As the ladies are going in for tea, the students say, we would like a table as well. We would like to buy a ham sandwich. We'd like to buy a tea. They're taken out and arrested. And so they're in prison together, Lonnie, my friend, and Dr. King. And at first, it feels like a nonviolence retreat. They're talking about the future of the movement. They're thinking about how they're going to make change. But something happens that really escalated the danger of all of this. Dr. King didn't understand because he had been racially profiled a few months before and given a ticket for not having updated his license to have a Georgia license. He still had his Alabama license, which most people would have when you first move somewhere. But a racist judge gave him a suspended sentence to state prison. And when that judge heard about, oh, that troublemaker King got arrested, I want him in my courtroom to have a hearing on revoking his probation. And so a few days later, and Harris, my friend who served on the Kennedy campaign, without any permission, he kind of got his campaign involved in this. That he starts making calls down, could we get Dr. King out? And then the mayor of Atlanta blurts out, well, the Kennedy campaign has made overtures. And so Harris was already in trouble because King is a controversial leader. And the Kennedy campaign is trying to hold on to the South to win it. Because at that time, the South voted Democrat and Kennedy was the Democrat. But the students are let free, and King is ordered into this racist judge's courtroom. And that judge gives Dr. King a 4-month sentence on the chain gang, hard labor in this rural Georgia prison called Reedsville. And we found lots of documentation of the way that black men were killed in Reedsville, that people could disappear, and is a place where Coretta calls Harris Wofford and is saying, they're going to kill Martin. I know they're going to kill him. And his Daddy King, is told by powerful men in Georgia, like, they can just get rid of your son. And so the King family thought that their beloved Martin might never emerge from this. And how different history would be if Dr. King had been had this bus boycott and was a footnote in history of this martyr who died in a jail. But so the King had a great lawyer named Donald Hollowell who tried to put segregation on trial in front of this judge. The judge didn't hear it, sentences him. In the middle of the night, Dr. King is woken up at 4 a.m, shackled, put in the back of a police car, not told where he's going, and driven off into the night. And so Dr. King thought he was going to his death. He thought he would never see his family again. He thought he was going to be lynched. And they drive for hours across rural Georgia. There's not highways back then, through the backwoods of it. And as daybreak comes, they see the state prison, and he knows, okay, that's where I was being taken. But I'll talk at the end about how transformational that night was for King becoming the King we remember, because he really faced down death that night. But Coretta is putting pressure on their friend Harris. What are you going to do for Martin? What are we going to do here? And Harris, Dr. King is the person he believes in, his friend. He's working for John Kennedy, but his heart's with Dr. King. So what are you going to do about it? So he and his partner on the campaign, Louis Martin, go out for a beer. And he said, and they've been trying to get press releases released. The campaign doesn't want to do it. Bobby Kennedy, the campaign manager, is pretty much telling them, like, just shut up. But Harris says, what if John Kennedy just called Coretta? Like, that would be a really human gesture. And Louis Martin says, that's exactly right. That would affect people like me. That would show, his heart and the kind of character he is. And so they get this idea to their boss, Sergeant Shriver. Sergeant Shriver he had married one of John Kennedy's sisters, and he ran the Merchandise Mart in Chicago, but he had a real social justice heart. The Kennedys didn't really trust him because he had such a, because he was so against racism, and he had done organizing for that in Chicago. And Shriver says, yeah, I will get the idea to him. He's at O'Hare Airport. He's about to fly out to Michigan. If I can get him alone, I think I can get him to do it. And so at the O'Hare Inn, Shriver waits till advisors are out of the room. He asks Kennedy to make this call to Coretta. Kennedy just thinks it's a decent thing to do. He doesn't think it's going to change politics or world history, but he calls the wife of this controversial activist and expresses his sympathy for what's going on. But it's important to go into a different world than ours today, because the students thought Richard Nixon would speak up for King, because the King family was planning to vote for Richard Nixon. Black Atlantans voted Republican. They were persecuted by the Democratic governor and the Democratic senators. And so, and Nixon had befriended King 3 years before. They had exchanged letters. Dr. King had visited Nixon in his office. It's a totally different Nixon than our historical memory. But heading into this election, most Black Americans thought Nixon was more sympathetic to them than John Kennedy. And that's what Harris and Louis were trying to change. And so, but instead, so it's this Kennedy that makes a call to Coretta. And then Kennedy and Bobby start working behind the scenes with these racist Georgia officials to try to get King out. They're like, essentially, we know you don't like King, but this is creating a problem for our party and for us. And for the Kennedys, they were, they didn't want to get involved in this explosive situation that this troublesome civil rights team had created for them. But then they were inclined not just to do a gesture, but to actually solve a problem. And so, in 9 days, you can read about, it's almost like a spy novel of the back channels and behind the scenes of how it happened. But they were, at the end of this 9 days, able to get King home, and King's lawyer had found a technicality that gave the judge cover, but Bobby Kennedy had called this judge. John Kennedy had called the governor. They're able to get King safe and sound. The students are waiting for him as he's flown home on a single-engine plane. The students who loved him, King had their back. He didn't try to co-opt their movement. He supported them. His family is waiting to embrace him. But then Louis Martin, the Black advisor on the Kennedy campaign, he a couple days later, he's feeling like, I don't think Black voters have really focused in on the good thing our candidate did. And so he has an idea. What if we just create a pamphlet that tells the story and get it out through Black communities, through Black neighborhoods, so the white voters who don't like King in the South, they're never going to focus in on it, but the voters we need are going to hear this story. And one thing I loved about Harris and Shriver, they immediately back him. And Shriver says, I'll get you the money to do this, and we're not going to even tell my brothers-in-law. Because the brothers-in-law had said, all right, you civil rights advisors, you don't do a single thing for the rest of this campaign. You're done. You've caused enough trouble. And they're like, okay. 1 day later, we are going to distribute 2 million pamphlets across Black America. And so, but I love that Shriver and Harris, they trusted Louis Martin's lived experience, and they trusted his judge. We always say, listen, but what does that mean? When things are most consequential, when it might be risky to us, when it might go against what we think might be the best thing, are we really willing to listen to someone who has a different perspective? And Louis had this brilliant idea, and so they do this, and it's an incredible operation, one of the great campaign schemes ever of how they get these pamphlets to all these different cities, and they go out through the churches and the barbershops and the community centers, and they are able to shift the Black vote 7 key percentage points in an election where, these days, it's a few states are close. In the 1960 election, more than half of the states were decided by a few thousand votes. So when you have Black voters shifting, just in a close election, everything matters, but that was really critical in at least 9 states to get Kennedy into the White House and to really give us the political parties we have today. But what I loved about the story that I was really left with in writing this is the way in which the students, going back to the students, that they had the boldness to get Americans to pay attention and to force this issue. And as activists, it's what we have to do, because they elect Kennedy, but then all of a sudden, Kennedy wasn't behind civil rights. It really took 3 years of continued civil rights protests. And Andrew Young, an advisor of King, Dr. King's, told me that King said, you know, you haven't been to death's door like I have on that night to Reidsville. You don't know what that's like. But that allowed Dr. King to go on to Birmingham. And Birmingham is where King creates this moral theater that we were talking about last hour of the children, you know, Americans seeing on TV, the fire hoses, the dogs. It changes a lot of hearts and minds. It creates the public will. President Kennedy finally gets behind civil rights legislation, which Louis Martin and Harris Wofford have been working behind the scenes to try to get Kennedy to do more on. But he finally does it because activism changes things, and King's brilliance of how he used the strategies of nonviolence, that is able, after the Kennedy assassination, to get the Civil Rights Act passed. And then obviously King goes on to Selma after John Lewis and the activists in their long work are beaten at Bloody Sunday, and that gets us the Voting Rights Act. But you know, as I think back to the students, and as I think back to our Unitarian principles, you know, justice, equality, and compassion in human relations, a goal of a world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, they were willing to do things that were risky to them, that were uncomfortable, that were beyond their comfort zones. They were willing to go into Southern jails. And so as I live with that story over these past few years in writing this book, it's made me challenge myself. You know, I don't have to do that exactly, but maybe I should. But there's things I can do, things that I might be afraid to do, but that we have to do to make the change happen. You know, you have to be bolder. And as we think about the first principle as Unitarians, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, it mattered that people spoke up for Dr. King, that Harris for his friend, that ultimately Kennedy does, because and it challenges us when there are moments when there is a wrong, when there is an injustice. Are we willing to say something, or just something that's, you know, said that's wrong? You know, are we willing to use our voice? You know, as these characters ultimately did. So, you know, as we think about those principles, as we think about a team in Louis Martin, Harris Wofford, and Sergeant Shriver, they were willing to listen to each other. And I think for us as Unitarians, as we work in coalition, as we do things with others, we have to be willing to listen, to hear things that might be different than how we think about things, but we can actually do that work together when we're willing to do that, and when we're willing to be bold. That's where the change happens. We know when Dr. King is killed in 1968, great progress had been made, but the challenges in 1968 are not dissimilar to the challenges we have today, when there are still so many racial inequalities, when equality is not lived in everyone's life every day. And so those are the challenges he passes on to us. You know, and I hope this is a story that reminds us that we can't be Dr. King, none of us can, but we can be like those students who had just showed up in the fall, who didn't think of themselves as activists, but just showed up, got involved. That morning, October 19th, 1960, went downtown, had a picket sign, were willing to be there with others, and that's, you know, what I hope that comes out of the story for me, for all of us, for us as Unitarians, to realize Dr. King's beloved community. Thank you.
Paul Kendrick, once again, everybody, very nice sermon. Thank you so much for attending our humble little abode here. Now is the time in our service for our offering. We give to remind ourselves how many gifts we have to offer. We give to remember that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. We give because we believe in music and sacred space. We give with the faith that together we have enough. The PayPal link is on the screen, but it is not clickable. A clickable link will be shared in the chat box. During the music, you may come forward and drop your offering into the basket. For your prayers, your presence, your service, and your gifts, we are truly grateful. The closing hymn will be number 149, Lift Every Voice and Sing. Thank you, Jeremy, as always. Come for the music, stay for the epiphanies.
Please rise if you're
Thank
Okay, where am I at here? Closing words. Number 689, that's correct. Thank you, Maggie. Sorrow will one day turn to joy. All that breaks the heart and oppresses the soul will one day give place to peace and understanding, and everyone will be free. By Paul Robeson. Wasn't he a musician? Grateful Dead? I knew I heard the name.
He was a singer, though.
Okay, so postlude. Oh, and then we extinguish the chalice. So here we go. This is my first time playing in front of people since the pandemic. I did a few videos for Paul Henry's to help them raise money to fix their roof in Hammond. And anybody that can help keep that place alive. It's such a more than a firehouse. It's a cultural center. It's a meeting for activists who march to help the Whitey 41 from Paul Henry's that we all recognize from there. So yeah, but I digress. I'm embarrassed to say that I only became aware of this song about 4 years ago when a bass player friend of mine asked me to learn it, and he was going to sing it, and it never came to fruition. And after talking to Maggie yesterday, I worked this up. I've never played it in front of people, and I've never really practiced it. So it is. Well, it is what it is. You guys have heard me before. It is what it is. I was born by a river in a little tin, just like that river. I've been running ever since. It's been a long, long time running, but I know a change is gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. It's been too hard living, but I'm afraid to die, 'cause I don't know what's out there beyond the sky. It's been a long, long time coming, but I know change is gonna come. Oh Lord, we need it now. I go to the movie and I go downtown. Somebody keep telling me they don't want me around. It's been a long, long time coming, and I know a change is gonna come. Oh, we need it now. Then I go to my brother. I say, brother, help me please, please. And then he winds up knocking me back down on my knees. for long, but now I think I'm able to carry on. It's been a long time coming, and I know a change has to come. Oh, we need it now. Thank you. That was Sam Cooke. Change is gonna come. Sorry, Sam. I think that is probably one of the most relevant songs to today's situation and needs to be brought back. So, we're extinguishing the chalice, right? Okay. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Amen and blessed be. Please join us for coffee.